Hi, my name is Colleen Eddy, and I'm a doctoral candidate in counseling psychology with the University of Missouri, and I'm a research assistant with the Missouri Prevention Science Institute. I'm going to be talking about stress management for teachers today in an online video. This program was created by Dr. Keith Herman and Dr. Wendy Reinke with the University of Missouri and the Missouri Prevention Science Institute. So what I'm going to go over today comes from a book called Stress Management for Teachers. And this is a guide with a lot of coping skills and good supports for teachers in stress management. I'm not going to go over everything. I'm going to go over the first 4 parts of the book to give you an overview of the program, a model for coping with stress. I'm going to go over building awareness and adaptive thinking. And then there's some other sections on adaptive behaviors and beyond survival. And you will have access to those videos, but first we're going to start here. So as we go through this, I'm going to ask some questions, and I want you to reflect on these questions. So it might be helpful for you to have a notebook or a piece of paper so you can write your thoughts down as we go. It's really important for you to reflect for yourself to think about how this program will work for you. So as part of that, it's helpful if you can take some notes and think about how some of these questions relate to your own experience. So to start, I just want to ask a general question about what you think causes people to experience negative emotions like stress, sadness, or anger. Maybe take a second to write a few thoughts down for this. Do you think events cause emotions? Are emotions caused by what happens to us? Or is there something else going on? So sometimes we ask this question in a group and we hear from people about their experiences, and some people do share that there are certain events that can be, stressful, but there might be something more going on in between the events in our experience. So thinking about teaching, I want to go over this scenario. At a faculty meeting in Riley Elementary, the principal announces that she will be making weekly observations in every teacher's classroom for the remainder of the school year. 3 teachers at the school have very different emotional reactions to the news. Ms. Malcolm feels inspired and excited about the announcement, Mr. Gonzalez feels anxious, and Ms. Phipps feels angry. So they all experienced the same event, and yet their emotional reactions were completely different. So back to these questions. Do events or the things that happen to us cause our feelings? Like we said before, there might be some events that tend to cause stress in a lot of people, like weddings or moving or things like that. But it's not necessarily just the event itself that causes that emotion. What has a more direct impact on how we feel? And what that is our thoughts and how we respond can really have a more direct impact on how we feel than the event itself. So if we go back to the scenario with the principal announcing that they're going to be doing weekly observations, that's a lot. So what might be going on for all the teachers who experience different emotional reactions is they might be thinking about the situation in different ways. Maybe they have a different relationship with their principal. Maybe they've had different past experiences with observations going well or not going so well that is influencing how they're responding and how they feel about this situation. Move myself up there a little bit. So with that in mind, if it's not just the events that happen to us, but how we think about the event that can cause our emotional reaction, the good news is we can have some level of control there. And we can intervene in a way to reduce that emotional intensity of some of the stress that we experience. So first, I'm going to talk a bit about what stress is and what its purpose is and how it actually can be helpful for us. So think for a second about how you experience stress. There come some common responses to how many people experience stress, but it can vary a bit from person to person. It can be a very physical thing. Some people experience some really common physical things that happen with it. Some people feel their thoughts racing. Some people might be more irritable. What is it like for you? And then let's think for a sec, is stress good or bad? What can be good about stress? What can be bad about stress? Oftentimes when we reflect on this question, we can find that there are actually some good things about stress. Stress can be motivating. It can, if you have a deadline and you really need to work hard to meet that deadline, it can kind of give you that push to work hard and maybe stay up late to get something done. And in some ways that can be energizing and activating. It tells you that you care about something if you're stressed and trying to get it done. On the other hand, it can be bad. Oftentimes, with talking to teachers, that stress can be bad when it gets in the way of the things that I care about and is actually hurting me from getting what I want to get done, or hurting my relationships, or if I'm taking stress home from work and that's impacting how I feel all the time, that's when it's bad. So think for yourself, when is it good and when is it bad? And it's important to reflect on that, because this program and in general with stress management, the idea isn't to get rid of all stress. It's not to remove stress from your life, because first of all, that's not realistic. It's probably not possible to remove all stress from your life. And second, we don't want to get rid of some of the good parts with stress, because it can, again, be helpful for us and it does serve a purpose. What something like this program is trying to do is not trying to get rid of stress, but it's trying to give you some supports to reduce stress so that it doesn't get to that bad stress that's getting in the way of what you care about and what you want to get done, or really having an impact on your well-being, on your professional life or your personal life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about biology, because stress can be such a physical experience in the body, and it's related to our nervous system. So there's a central nervous system, there's a peripheral nervous system, and then that's further divided into the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is the one that arouses the body. That's the one that gets it ready for action. You've heard of probably fight or flight from your biology class. And this is a system that's similar across mammals. So our system is very similar to any other mammals out there in the wild. This is helpful for us because it gets us ready, again, for fight or flight in a dangerous situation. So a whole host of things happen in the body that prepares it for action. So looking at this slide, you can see that when the sympathetic nervous system, the arousing system, gets activated, our pupils dilate, that lets in more light, so that our vision actually sharpens a little bit, so we're ready to respond to what's going on in the environment. Our heartbeat accelerates, and that's just to get the blood pumping, to get oxygen to the muscles so that we're ready for action. The stomach inhibits digestion, so it stops digesting because it wants to conserve its resources. It doesn't want to have to worry about digesting when it's trying to defend itself, defend its life. This also creates a cascade of hormones that are released into the body, one of which is cortisol. You might have heard of that as a stress hormone. And again, in the short term, these are all helpful for us in the stress response, in really preparing us to fight back or flee in a very stressful situation. So that's the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, on the other hand, is a system that calms the body down. So with this system, everything kind of goes back to regular functioning. So the pupils contract, go back to normal, the heart rate goes back to normal, digestion resumes, everything kind of goes back to its typical functions. So as you can see, this process that we have is really helpful in those life or death situations. Like if the example of a gazelle out in the wild, and they see a predator approaching, and then the sympathetic nervous system would activate, and breathing would increase, getting in more oxygen, the blood flow would increase, getting that gazelle ready to run away. And then when it ran away and it was safe, then that parasympathetic nervous system would start and bring all the functions kind of back to normal and calm it down. So, if we were crossing the street and saw a car coming, or some emergency like that, the sympathetic nervous system would really be helpful for us in activating us to keep safe and stay and protect ourselves. So it's very helpful in those short-term emergencies, and it serves a basic need for survival. So again, we're not trying to get rid of that process, But the problem is this system is poorly designed for the types of stress that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So what can happen is our body can be responding in this life or death situation to things that aren't actually life or death. How often do we experience life or death situations in the classroom? Hopefully never. But if our body is responding to those everyday hassles and things like, stressful phone calls from parents or even paperwork, like it's life or death, that can take a toll. It's exhausting for the body to constantly be activating in this way. So in order to manage stress, we need to learn how to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, that calming system, and inactivate the sympathetic nervous system more often. So we want that calming system to be happening, and we want to not have that sympathetic nervous system constantly being aroused and activated. And the good news is we do have some direct control over this. Our thoughts and our behaviors are really closely tied to this chronic stress response. And so we're going to be talking about some ways to increase adaptive thinking and increase adaptive behaviors so that this parasympathetic nervous system is activated more often and is able to calm us down. So that's the take-home message and the last part that we'll talk about for biology for this part. Okay, so before we go into the teacher coping model, I want to talk a bit about the rationale for this program and some common experiences of teachers with stress. Teaching can be such a stressful profession, and we know this from research. A lot of teachers report that it is highly stressful. And here are some common sources of stress that the teachers we've talked about have reported. The first one is administrative support and expectations. So this teacher said, we're not in it to be respected, but we are asking to be treated with respect as experts in our area, and that's never the message that's given out. Colleagues. Sometimes it can be challenging to deal with colleagues. That's not always easy. Gossip and that kind of thing can happen in the workplace, and as it's already can be a stressful profession, adding on some of those workplace dynamics can be really challenging. Time demands and limited resources. There's too many things for us to do and the amount of time we have to do them. I think the most important work is with the children, but there's all the paperwork on top of all the challenges in the classroom, so we end up doing a lot of our work at home. This one can be a big one, the time demands. Diverse student needs and differentiating instruction. Everyone's different and everyone learns differently and has different needs, and what happens outside of the classroom to these students greatly impacts what happens inside the classroom. I have to build relationships with every one of them, and that's just really hard to do when there's 30 in a class and some of them are very needy. And this is an elementary school teacher, and sometimes middle school teachers and high school teachers have even more students that they have to build relationships with, and that can be really tough to do. Student behaviors and attitudes. In this environment, the multitude of behaviors all going on at the same time that are difficult behaviors. They're not typical third grade child behaviors. The children are very upset many times and aren't able to manage their emotions, so they manifest in so many ways, lashing out at others, being stubborn and unwilling to cooperate, running out of the room. There's so much going on at one time. Lack of preparation. So not having the time that you want to adequately be able to prepare for a lesson, or not feeling like you have the tools that you needed from your education programs to prepare you for the work in teaching. A lot of teachers report they wish they had more strategies and training in classroom management, because that can be, going back to student behaviors, that can be a big challenge. Life stress. We're people, and it's hard not to take what happens at home into the workplace, as the same way it's hard not to take what happens at work to home. So life stress can be a challenge. And dealing with parents can be challenging sometimes. So this is a list of main categories of stressors for teachers. So maybe think for a sec, is there any one of these that stands out to you as one that's particularly stressful? Or is there anything you would add to the list? So I mentioned the rationale for this program, and a lot of the work that our research institute does is related to youth mental health in schools. And in working with a lot of teachers, understanding how much is going on at one time and how hard it can be to support students when there's so much going on. And this was a quotation that we had from a teacher. Every day I feel under attack. Sometimes it feels like nobody respects teachers anymore. At work, many students and parents don't seem to respect us. Even worse, it seems like every time I pick up a paper or turn on the news, there's a story about what's wrong with teachers. It's as if society expects us to solve all the world's problems and then blames us when we don't. We know teaching is so critical to our society and to children and families and to the future, and yet it can be so stressful. And so this program isn't going to solve all of those problems, but it's meant to provide some support, some strategies that may be helpful to reduce that stress a little bit, so that it's not interfering again with things that you want to get done, or going home too much and interfering with your personal life. So we always ask these questions, and maybe think for a sec right now, how stressful is your job? Where would you put yourself on that line from 0 to 10? Would you say it's not stressful, 0? Would you say more in the middle, or very stressful? So think about your number, maybe write it down. And then think about how well are you coping with the stress of your job right now? Again, use that line from 0 to 10. This time 0 means you're not coping very well, and 10 you're coping very well. Again, pick a number on that line and see where you fall, towards the low end or towards the high end. So like I mentioned, we ask these questions to teachers a lot, and what we found is that teachers can tend to fall in 4 different categories here. So there's one group that reported they had high coping and low stress, and that's great. But unfortunately, this was the smallest group of teachers that participated in this study. The smallest group at the beginning said they were in that well-adjusted group. So unfortunately, it's great that they had high coping and low stress, but that was the smallest percentage of teachers. Then there was another group that reported moderate stress and moderate coping. So their stress was still pretty high, and the coping was a little bit above that. And that was the largest group, about 60%. We had another group that reported higher stress and more moderate coping. And this was about 20%. And then a group with high stress and reported that they weren't coping as well. And what we also found is looking at outcomes for their students in their classrooms was that the teachers who were reporting the highest stress and the lowest coping also tended to have more behaviors in the classroom, more disruptive behaviors, and this was associated with student outcomes as well. So we know that the stress can kind of be contagious, and when teachers are struggling and really stressed, then this can be tough on students in the classroom, and kind of vice versa. So the good news is, though, is that a program like this, a brief program even, can be helpful in providing some coping strategies and reducing some of that stress a little bit. So we did we examined before and after using a program very similar to this one, and we found that teachers who participated in the program increased in their coping, increased in their awareness and use and understanding of coping strategies. So hopefully by watching this video, by participating in the program, there'll be a few things that you find that you can start incorporating into your life to increase that coping and hopefully reduce that stress a little bit. So this program is based in theory, good psychological theory. This isn't a program that's just pulling things from different places and putting them together. It's really one that's meant to give you a good framework for thinking about coping with stress in your life. So it's all based in good theory from psychology, social learning theory, and cognitive behavioral theory. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So this framework is just the idea that thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, the 3 of them are all connected, and they all relate to each other, and they're all connected. So by changing one, you can change the others. Let me talk a bit about each of those things first. So when we think about this, of the three, there's one that's a little bit harder to change than the others, and that's feelings. And that's because the feelings are those one-word descriptions for our emotions: mad, happy, sad, stressed, worried. And those can be hard to change because we can't just snap our fingers and all of a sudden feel a certain way. It would be great if we could, but it doesn't quite work like that. In order to change how we feel, we need to change our thoughts or our behaviors. Those can have a direct influence on how we feel. And we have more direct control over our thoughts and our behaviors. And by adjusting those, we can change feelings. So thoughts are the words that go through our heads. Those are the things that we say to ourselves on a daily basis. And while we do have some direct control over those, it's not easy to change thoughts. And we're going to be talking about some strategies for doing that. But likely we've been thinking in same patterns and ways for years and years. So this can be hard to do. None of these things are really easy to change. But our thoughts are the things that go through our head, and that how we think can really have an influence on how we feel. Our behaviors, the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, can also really have a direct influence on how we feel. And so all of these three things are really connected. Our behaviors are the observable things that we do, like raising my hand, that's a behavior. And while, again, we can have behavioral patterns and habits that can be really tough to change, we do have some direct control over it. We can smile even if we don't feel like smiling, or try different things out. All of those are behaviors. So these three things are connected, and they can also really influence each other and create these cycles. So as an example, for a negative cycle, sometimes our thoughts and our behaviors can lead to some negative feelings, and that can lead to more negative thoughts and more negative behaviors. So for example, I often think about myself and the fact that I sometimes have a hard time getting up in the morning, and I set multiple alarms, and even then I still might not wake up and might still be running behind. So I might set an alarm, and then I might hit snooze, and then I'll hit snooze again and hit snooze. And I'll finally wake up, and my first thought will be like, I'm such an idiot, I overslept, I'm gonna be late, today is gonna be awful. So that's my first thought as I wake up in the morning. So then that might lead to me doing a negative behavior. I might skip breakfast because I feel like I don't have time. I gotta get out the door. I might snap at the dog on my way out and just rush out there. Because I'm rushing, I might forget something important. And so I'm getting in the car and I'm thinking to myself, of course, today would be the day that I'm running late. I'm such an idiot, this always happens. So those are some negative thoughts, negative behaviors, and so I'm having some negative feelings, and I'm frustrated, and I'm on the way to work, and I get in and I have to meet with a student, and I'm already feeling negative. And so that's just a negative cycle. Already I started off the day that way. The good thing is, though, is these cycles can be kind of switched around a little bit. So by checking in with some of those negative thoughts and negative behaviors, switching some of them around in small ways, it might lead to some more positive feelings, and I might be in a better place to start out my workday. So for example, same situation, I'm running late, and I think to myself first thing, oh, I'm running late, I'm such an idiot. I hit snooze again, why did I do that to myself? That's a negative thought. Maybe I can adjust that thought and think, okay, I'm running late, but today can still be a good day. I can still get there on time if I leave in the next 10 minutes. Maybe as a behavior, instead of skipping breakfast, maybe I can grab a bar out the door so that I'm not starving by 11 o'clock when I'm still going to be working with students. Maybe on the way to work, a positive behavior could be to listen to music that I enjoy or something that can boost my mood a little bit. So small adjustments that can make a little bit of a difference in my mood, so that when I get there, I'm in a better place to do what's important to me and to support the student that I'm going to be meeting with. So the teacher coping model is really based in this model that thoughts, behaviors, and feelings are all connected. So we all want to feel more calm and relaxed and happy, and that's the ultimate end goal there. And so to do that, we want to focus on increasing adaptive thoughts and adaptive behaviors. And we're going to talk about some specific strategies for those. But first, on the other side of that, we want to talk about building awareness, because building awareness can be a really important first step in order to make changes. So to give you an overview of what would kind of be recommended with this program is you spend 1 week focused on each section. So 1 week focused on building awareness, 1 week focused on adaptive thoughts, 1 week on adaptive behaviors, and then hopefully that'll lead to more positive feelings. We provided different strategies for each of these things because what works for one person might not work for another person, or it might not work in a different situation. So by giving you different strategies, you can kind of help create your own coping plan and find what works best for you. So today I'm going to talk about the building awareness and start talking about adaptive thinking, and there are more videos that are related to adaptive thinking and adaptive behaviors. This is another way of looking at the teacher coping model, and the building awareness part is really the base of the pyramid because we really want to get that good foundation, understand where we're at with things and aware of how we're doing with stress management, and then start adding on some of these adaptive thinking and adaptive behavior sections. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about building awareness. Again, I'd recommend thinking about this for a week, building some awareness with how you're doing with your stress, and then trying maybe 1 or 2 of the strategies that are outlined in the book and that I'll go over right now. So the first strategy is mood monitoring. And this is really simple. I like this one because it only takes a few, like maybe not even a minute to do. And by itself, it can cause some positive changes. So this is just checking in with yourself once a day and rating your mood. And it can be done in a variety of ways. It could be as simple as something like this, looking at a line and thinking, okay, how relaxed versus tense am I today? And placing yourself somewhere along that line. So maybe do that right now. How relaxed versus tense are you? Are you pretty relaxed? Are you more on the tense side of things, or are you somewhere in the middle? And the more that you do this, you'll find that the easier it is to actually figure out where you are on that line, because you'll start to kind of see changes from a day-to-day basis. So you might be like, well, I'm definitely more tense than I was yesterday, so I'm definitely further up on this line. You could use a line like this, or you could use a rating scale from 0 to 10. There's some examples in the book, and put yourself on that number scale. It can also be helpful for you to start writing down what are some of the things that I did that day, or what are some of the things I thought about. And you might start to find some patterns when you start doing this mood monitoring. You might notice on certain days of the week you feel a little bit better, or certain days that you do certain things you feel a little bit better. So again, this by itself can cause some positive changes. You might be able to start intervening a little bit sooner if you notice that your mood has been low for a few days. So this is a great one, and there's also it can be done on a piece of paper, it can be done in a notebook. Really the best system is the one that's going to work for you and the one that you'll be consistent with. There are some phone apps that do this too, and they'll prompt you once a day to rate your mood. So if that's something that could work for you, that can be good to try. So mood monitoring is a great thing to give a shot. You can give it a try for a week, kind of like an experiment, and see how it goes. The next one that we like to talk about with the building awareness is breathing. And the reason we want to talk about this at the beginning is because how we breathe is so closely tied to that parasympathetic nervous system. So we talked about how the body calms down when that parasympathetic nervous system is going, and breathing has a really direct control over that. So when you take slow and relaxed breaths, that is sending the message to the brain, hey, this isn't an emergency, calm down. So by practicing breathing and practicing doing slow breaths with long exhales, that is training the body to calm down and getting that parasympathetic nervous system going. So practicing breathing can be a good way to start thinking about stress management. Again, it's cool because it's a simple thing, but it can cause some positive changes. One thing I would recommend with breathing is, if this is something you'd like to try with the building awareness section, is to practice breathing in situations. When you first start practicing it, practice it when you're not already feeling stressed. Because if you start practicing it when you're not already feeling stressed, then it'll be easier for you to start using it in those moments when you are feeling stressed, if you're already used to doing some slow and relaxed breathing. Again, there are different ways to do this. You don't need a phone app or anything to practice breathing. You just can start thinking about, counting the number of inhales and then the number of exhales and trying to see, how long you can go. You don't want to hold your breath or anything like that. You do really want it to be kind of a slow and relaxed thing. There are phone apps for this too, or different videos that you can watch to help for practicing breathing. But again, the cool thing about breathing is you don't need anything else other than just your body and focusing on that. The next part is goal setting. This can be really important for this awareness section, to set a goal for this program at the beginning. We know that if you set a goal that's specific, that's realistic, and that's attainable, and that you're able to, track over time, that you're more likely to reach that goal. So for building awareness at the beginning, think about what you want to get out of a program like this. Do you want to have a goal of reading 1 chapter a week? Do you want to have a goal of trying 1 new strategy a week? Do you want to have a goal of practicing for 5 minutes, 3 days out of the week? Set something specific and then write it down. Hold yourself accountable to it. And then if you reach your goal, reward yourself for it. These are the 3 things that can be really helpful for the awareness, building awareness. I mentioned the mood monitoring. Here's a form that you can use for this. This is from the 1 to 10 scale, looking at different emotions and how you're doing that day. There's a PDF versions of these handouts from the book that you can print out and just have, on your desk or at home to use. Or again, you could do it on your phone, whatever works best for you. So this is the building awareness section. So think to yourself for a moment, which of these 3 strategies do you want to try this week for building awareness? And give it a shot. There's no harm in giving it a try. Most of these things really will only take a few minutes, but can cause some good changes. So I'm going to start talking about the adaptive thinking sections from the book. And this is a good thing to start on after you do the building awareness. So after you spend a week focusing on that, then start thinking about this. But I do want to introduce this because this part can be tough. It's not easy to change those thoughts that go through our heads. They happen so quickly and automatically, and it can be challenging to change them. And so I'm going to be talking about 2 main ways for adaptive thinking. One might work better for you, and that's totally fine. So the first one is the positive and negative thoughts method. And this is just the simple idea that our mood is determined by the number of positive things that we think and do during the day, the number of negative things that we think and do during the day. So in order to improve our mood, we want to increase our positive thinking and decrease our negative thinking. And it's important to do both at the same time. Think about planting a garden. You need to plant the seeds. Those are the positive thoughts. And that'll grow into flowers or whatever you'd like to grow in your garden. And we want to remove the weeds. We want to remove those negative thoughts. We want to do both of those things at the same time. So it's helpful for this one to think about finding a strategy for both increasing positive thinking and then finding one for decreasing negative thinking. Again, with changing thoughts, I mentioned it can be so hard to do because our thoughts can happen so quickly and they just go through our heads, and so it's hard to change that, and it's hard to look at those thoughts when they're up there in our head and just often just taken for granted. So one thing I would recommend for changing thoughts is it can be so helpful to write them down so that you can see them out in front of you, and so that you can look at them and evaluate them and see if they're things that are helpful for you to think, or if there might be other ways you want to adjust your thinking. So for this week, when you focus on it, for the week when you focus on adaptive thinking, maybe carry around a journal that week, or maybe use your phone and write someplace in your phone. And you don't have to write everything that you're thinking every moment, but maybe picking 1 or 2 times a day to just jot down a few things that you thought during the past, hour, past half hour, and see how that is. So writing it down is much more likely that you'll be able to change some of those thoughts if you're able to see them. So this could be a handout that you could use to track positive and negative thoughts. You could, again, as kind of an experiment, you could during the day just start jotting down, okay, what are some of the positive things that I'm thinking? What are some of the negative things that I'm thinking? And then just look, like, how many negative things did I think during the day? How many positive things did I think? Just something you could give a try when you start tracking those. So in adjusting negative thinking, we can come up with a positive replacement thought. So if you start writing down some of those negative thoughts that you have during the day, and you might notice that there's some ones that you tend to have pretty often. Or there's a handout here that goes over some common negative thoughts that we've heard from teachers. And these are things like, I'm a terrible teacher. It's awful to be disrespected. This will never work. I can't stand it. This is too hard. I'm losing control. So these are some common negative thoughts. Take a look through this list and see if there's any that you tend to have. Are there any that jump out as like, oh yeah, that's one that I have? And if so, check it off and try to come up with a positive replacement thought. So with changing thinking, we're not trying to pretend that everything is great and wonderful and beautiful when it's not. What we're really trying to do is come up with maybe seeing if we can adjust some of those negative thoughts to be a little bit more realistic or not as intense, so that they're not making us feel so bad. So this isn't pretending like going from thinking I'm a terrible teacher to I'm the best teacher in the world. That's not a good positive replacement thought, because you probably wouldn't believe it, and so it probably wouldn't make you feel very much better, and it's not super realistic. So we want to take some of these negative thoughts and see how we could adjust them. And one way to do that is thinking about what you might tell a friend, or what you might tell someone else if they came to you and said that negative thought. So for example, I'm a terrible teacher. You could adjust that one to being, maybe I'm not doing my best right now as a teacher, but maybe I can turn it around this afternoon. Or I'm not being my best right now, but tomorrow's a new day. This will never work. Again, maybe that one could be shifted to, this isn't working right now, but I can give it another shot, or I just need to make another adjustment and see. I can't do this. Maybe we can adjust that to be something like, I've done this before, or I'm doing the best I can. So give it a try with some of the negative thoughts that you have and see if you can come up with a positive replacement thought. Now I'm going to talk about increasing positive thoughts. One way to do that is to take a moment to reflect on what inspires you and what energizes you about teaching and in this profession. So to increase positive thinking in a deliberate way, again, we want to try to write some things down, have some reminders for increasing the positive thinking. So take a moment to reflect on why you became a teacher in the first place and see if you can tap into that passion. So one thing for positive thinking could be to write down a list of all of the things that you love about being a teacher, and then making a plan to reread that on a regular basis. Spending a couple minutes before the start of the day reading that list of things that you enjoy. Or some teachers have that rainy day file of things that students have given them that, thank you notes, things like that, and opening that up for a week on a daily basis, taking a look at that for a couple minutes and seeing if that starts to get you thinking more positively. Sometimes those positive thoughts can spiral, as we talked about, those cycles. So by priming yourself to think about those positive thoughts more often, you're more likely to have more positive thoughts during the day. Priming, having different reminders or cues for yourself throughout your classroom, throughout your life can be helpful to remember to think some of those positive things more often. Again, having cues in the classroom. One time I talked with some teachers about a stress management training similar to this one, and one of the teachers came up to me at the end and she said she has a rock that's shaped like a heart that she keeps in her pocket. And that's a cue to her when she feels that in her pocket to think something, it reminds her of her family and to think something positive. Having those little cues, having a smiley face posted on your computer, or every time you look at the clock thinking something positive, having a small reminder throughout the classroom. Another thing for increasing positive thinking is acknowledging accomplishments, because it's those everyday little successes that really can build up to cause big changes. And even small steps can take a lot of time and a lot of effort to get there. And if we're constantly jumping to the next thing and not acknowledging those accomplishments, that it can be helpful to acknowledge those accomplishments for positive thinking. And those self-rewarding thoughts. So we often think about praising students and rewarding students and giving them positive feedback, but we often don't have those same types of self-rewarding thoughts or praising ourselves as we do other people. So along the lines with positive thinking is having a coping thought. A coping thought, or having a couple coping thoughts, can be helpful in the moment, in stressful situations, to kind of coach yourself through, to kind of get you through those stressful situations. This is something that you can focus on and have say in your head, so that your thoughts don't start spiraling to those negative places. And these are some coping thoughts that some teachers have come up with, and you might have your own that you already like and already use, but here's a list of some. I can get through this. This won't last forever. It's okay to be upset. It'll pass. I've handled this before. Just remember to breathe. That's a good one, because remember that calming system, one step at a time. Take your time. There's no rush. Time is on my side. So all of these things are things that could be helpful in that stressful moment to keep yourself level and calm and in control, so that you're able to stay in the moment and kind of do what you need to get done in the classroom. Let's see. I like this one that's I don't fight with 8-year-olds. If it's something that can have a little bit of humor to it, or something that just, you smile when you think about it, that can be a good coping thought. So think about if you like anything from this list, or if there's any other coping thoughts that you tend to have, or something that maybe someone else has told you that's helped you in a stressful situation. And if you want to have that coping thought more often, if you feel like you need reminders of it, maybe posting it in your classroom, or having it on your computer, having a way to remind yourself of those coping thoughts. We've even talked with some teachers who have done this with students in their classroom, where they've had their students come up with coping thoughts around maybe a stressful time with testing or something like that. So I talked about increasing positive thinking, and now I'm going to talk about decreasing negative thinking. One strategy for that is worry time. So this involves scheduling a time of the day that you allow yourself to worry as much as you can, as much as you want, about as many topics as you want. You can worry as much as you want, really. So the important thing, though, is during that scheduled time, it's it's time limited. So you set a timer for no more than 20 minutes, and that's your worry session. And you have to have it scheduled, and you have to have that timer there. If you do find you need a couple more minutes, you can take a couple more minutes, but again, set the timer so that it's not taking up an indefinite amount of time. So during that time, worry about as many things as you want. And then after that, if you find yourself worrying outside of that worry time, that's okay. What you want to do is tell yourself, not right now. I'm going to allow myself, I'll worry about that during my worry time. Maybe write it down to remind yourself what that was, or have a reminder for yourself, and then during your next worry time, you can worry about that. People who try this out find that the more they do it, the less and less worry time they may need, and they might not even need it at all. And this is because by having a set time to worry, it can take some of that angst and intensity out of those worries away, because oftentimes when we worry about things, it's something that we're concerned about, but we can't actually do anything about it in that moment. And so it's something that we're thinking about, but it can be kind of consuming. And so having a set time can give you some of the more control back of those worries so that they don't take over and that you're constantly thinking about them. So give it a try. If you're someone who worries a lot, just see how it works. Try it for a few days and see. I've also heard of teachers doing this with students too, where they might have a student write down what they're worried about on a note card, and then sometimes again with testing, and then the teacher will take the note card and be like, okay, now I have this worry, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Taking back control of some of those worries. Time projection can be helpful for reducing negative thinking. So thinking, will this matter in 5 minutes? Will this matter in 5 hours, 5 weeks, 5 years? Will this matter in 100 years? So kind of projecting yourself into the future and putting that things in perspective a little bit with those negative thoughts. Again, kind of exaggeration, adding some flexibility and humor to it. Sometimes we think this is the worst thing that's ever happened, but is it the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of this school and the history of the world? So thinking about that. So goal setting, like I mentioned in the building awareness part, can be helpful. And so if you want to do the positive and negative thoughts method, you want to think about one positive strategy and one negative strategy. This is an example handout from the book that you can use to set a specific goal for trying one of these things. So I just went over the positive and negative thoughts method, and now I'm going to go over the ABC method. And you can try one of these for the adaptive thinking section. If you're someone who likes to argue or debate, this can be a good one for you. And this is based on the idea that how we think about a situation, what our beliefs are, and what our real deep beliefs about situations can really be making us feel certain ways. And this is really kind of getting at the heart of what we're thinking about in certain situations and why that's making us feel so strongly. So these handouts are in the book, and they go through, that kind of walks you through this map of how to use this process. And this can be a good system to use if you find yourself thinking about something for multiple days and you're wondering, why is this situation really bothering me? This is a good way of getting at what those beliefs that might be that really are troubling you, and then seeing if there are ways to adjust those beliefs to make you feel better. So it's called ABC. It looks complicated, but we'll go through it with an example. So that first example that I talked about with the principal announcing that they'd be doing weekly observations in every teacher's classroom, we had 3 teachers and they all had different emotional responses. So we're going to use that as our example. So Ms. Phipps felt frustrated, annoyed, and angry. An activating event. So let me back up a second. So the ABCs are the activating event, the beliefs, and the consequences. And when using this method, you go through each of those. You go out of order though. We start with the C. So you think about what you're feeling. What is that emotion that's coming up? and you write that down. Might be a couple of different emotions that are coming up. So in this example, Ms. Phipps is feeling frustrated, annoyed, and angry. So you write those down. Then we go to A, and we think about what the activating event is. And the activating event in this situation is the principal announcing that they would be doing weekly classroom observations starting next week. So the activating event is just the situation. It's just the facts. We don't want to use kind of emotional words here. We want to just, if an outside observer were looking at the situation, what would they say is the activating event? So then we get at the beliefs. So we ask ourselves, what about this situation is making me feel frustrated? What am I thinking about the principal doing weekly classroom observations that's making me feel frustrated, annoyed, and angry? So think, what could this teacher be thinking that's making her feel those ways? And she said, she's wasting my time. The principal's wasting my time. That's making her feel frustrated. She's just trying to show that she's in charge. That's making her feel annoyed. And she's incompetent and has no business telling me how to teach. And that's making me feel angry. As you can see, some of these are pretty intense, and they're not kind of sugar-coated here, and that makes sense because we do want to get to what that belief is. We want to get to what is that belief that's really making us feel angry or annoyed or frustrated. And oftentimes it is something that's kind of maybe even a little bit below the surface and a little bit and strong that's making us feel that way. So Mr. Gonzalez was feeling anxious, sad, and anxious and depressed about this. And that same situation with the principal announcing the faculty meeting that they'd be doing weekly observation. So for feeling anxious, he was thinking, my principal's gonna discover that I'm an imposter. Feeling sad, I'm not a good teacher. So thinking I'm not a good teacher, and the principal's gonna see this, making him feel sad. And then anxious and depressed, he's thinking, I'm gonna lose my job. So he's really feeling some of these strong things related to those beliefs of, if these observations happen, then I'm going to be discovered that I'm not doing a good job with my job and I might lose my job. And you can see how if he's thinking those things, if he's thinking that he's going to lose his job because of this, he would be feeling anxious and he would be feeling depressed. On the other hand, we have Ms. Malcolm, who was the one who was excited, inspired, and enthused. And that's the same situation, the principal doing the weekly observations. So her beliefs are a little bit different. What do you think she might be thinking that makes her feel excited about it? One, I'm gonna learn a lot from this experience. This is gonna give me a chance to be a great teacher, and it'll be great to get to know my principal better. So those are her thoughts that are leading to different emotional experiences. So we're gonna apply this example again with a new situation, and then we're gonna talk a bit about how we look at those beliefs and how we adjust them. So this situation, Mr. Caldera is nearing the end of his third period math instruction when he notices 3 students in the back texting and not paying attention. He stops his instruction, charges to the back of the room, waves his finger at the students and shouts, "I'm not gonna tell you again, put those away and start paying attention." He hovers over them for several more seconds before quickly turning away and walking to the front of the room. The class begins to notice he is flushed and visibly shaking as he begins instruction again. So let's look at this. Maybe try this one first on your own and think about, remember we're gonna start with the C, think about what emotions do you think he's feeling? Maybe write 1 or 2 down. So maybe he's feeling angry, he's visibly shaking, frustrated. And then what is the activating event? So what is this situation? So for emotions, we have furious, yeah, he's mad, frustrated, defeated, and hopeless. The activating event is just the situation. It's teaching in the third period math, delivering instruction when 3 students were texting. So think, what could he be thinking about this situation that's making him feel furious? What's making him feel frustrated? What's making him feel defeated and hopeless? So he's feeling furious. He's thinking, these are the most disrespectful students I have ever met. They don't care about anything but themselves. He's feeling frustrated because he's thinking, this happens every single day. And he's feeling defeated and hopeless because he's thinking, I'm never going to get through to them. So the funnel method is one way to really start to get down to what those beliefs are. We don't want to just scratch the surface and put down a belief that isn't what's really at the heart of what's bothering us. So this is one way to get those beliefs down there. And you can ask yourself, what about this thought bothers me? What is really upsetting me about this thought? If that were true, what would be so upsetting? So this is one way to get down to some of those beliefs, because often it's something that's kind of intense and maybe even you might have to dig down in there a little bit to see what is really upsetting you by asking some of these questions to get at the heart. So this is a roadmap for the whole method. We went through the A, the B, and the C, not in that order, but we went through those. And now that we have the beliefs about what's really making us feel those emotions, here's where we're going to try to adjust those beliefs or see if we want to adjust those beliefs. And the D stands for trying to disprove, dispute, debate. We're going to try to argue against some of those beliefs. Think about it if like we were looking at evidence, like we were a detective. We're trying to figure out, is this belief realistic? Is it true? Is there another way of looking at it? And trying to see if there's ways to adjust those beliefs that are making us feel so strongly. Then after doing that, we evaluate and see, how do we feel now? And is it as intense as it was before? If it is, that's okay. That might mean we need to try a different strategy in that situation, or we could try a different strategy. But we do go through this and we find that debating and disproving against some of these beliefs might make us feel a little bit, that might make the intensity of those emotions go down a little bit, and that can be helpful, especially for those situations that might be really bothering us. So we're going to do that with Ms. Phipps. We're going to do that with these examples that we just went through. So thinking about debating against the beliefs, she's wasting my time, we can say, well, she's just doing her job. She means well. The next one was, she's just trying to show that she's in charge. How can we argue against that one? Is there any other evidence for that? For here, they put, she is in charge and it is her decision. I do think she believes that it will be helpful. The next belief is she's incompetent, has no business telling me how to teach. So we want to look at that belief. Is that realistic? Is there any other evidence? And so to do that, for this example, we have, I actually don't know much about her teaching background. Regardless, she may have some good ideas, and the only way I will hear them is if I show her some respect. So this is a way we argued against those beliefs. We looked at different ways of thinking about them. We did a rating for how strongly do we believe those from 0 to 100. 100 means 100% we believe it. And then after debating, we look at, see what those percentages are, see if it's the same. After doing this, we look at the emotions. For she's just doing her job, she means well, maybe feeling more accepting, maybe feeling, if she is in charge, more resigned, and then not realizing you might not know much about her background, and she might have some good ideas, might lead to feeling more tolerant. So here we went from feeling frustrated, annoyed, and angry to feeling more accepting, resigned, and more tolerant. That's a shift, not going from now all of a sudden feeling excited about it, but maybe feeling less frustrated, and maybe that can be helpful in this situation. Mr. Caldera is the one that we went through with the example of the students texting. So some of these beliefs are, so these are the most disrespectful students I've ever met. They don't care about anything but themselves. So think about, how could we dispute against that? What might you say to, is there other evidence? You know, is there any other way of looking at it? Think about how we might adjust that one. one says, I can only be effective if I stay calm. I need to find another strategy. The next one was, this happens every single day. This could be a good one to look at the evidence. Is it every single day? Is it every single minute of every single day? Is there any other evidence? And so dispute against this one, it's, well, it happens a lot, not every day. Some days are better than others. And then 3, I'm never going to get through to them. To dispute against that, we might want to think about other ways of looking at it. They want me to give up. Everyone gives up on them. So we go back and look at the effect and the emotion now. First one's feeling disappointed but less angry, annoyed, and empowered. So again, not all of a sudden feeling great, but feeling a little bit better. So sometimes in the book, we talk about if you only do one thing. If you're very busy, probably have a lot of things going on, and it can be hard to make these changes. But good thing is even small things can make a difference, and small things can really add up to a big impact. So if you only try one thing could be to write a gratitude note. Reflecting on what someone has done for you and what they've meant to you can be really good for increasing your positive thoughts and make you feel better. So to do this is one strategy to try if you feel like you're low on time but want to at least give something a shot. So think about someone who has made your life better, and maybe think about the first person who pops into your mind who's had a positive influence on you, and take the time to write a thank you note. Make it specific and detailed, not just a general one. Try to write a good bit. And then if you really want to go the extra mile, send that note. Give it to them in person, or if you can't do that, send it to them in the mail. And hopefully what you'll find is that this will not only be good for them, it's always great to receive thank you notes. You might be someone who, like me, keeps every note that anyone's ever given them. It'll also really likely boost your mood as well. When we start to think about what we're grateful for, that can lead us to thinking more positive things and be more likely to do more positive things. So this can really kind of start spiraling into some positive feelings, and it can be a good thing to do as a classroom too with students. That's something to give a try. So we're beginning to wrap up here. I'm not going to go over the adaptive behaviors section from the book. It goes through different strategies for these. This is just giving you a preview of what the next part will be. And there's some other videos that are related to this. Adaptive behaviors, about specific strategies for increasing positive activities, communication, relaxation. For here, if you only do one thing with adaptive behaviors, is thinking about what went well in your classroom and what you enjoyed and what you did what went well. And again, kind of focusing on the positive can lead to more positive things happening. So that can be a thing to give a try. Following the adaptive behaviors section, there's a section on beyond survival, and this is really about long-term wellness. Beyond just coping with all the stressors going on, thinking about well-being and long-term things, and this talks about some neat things with mindfulness and values and virtues, what you really deeply care about, and again, that gratitude that can be a really important part for wellness and connecting with other people. So that section is after adaptive behaviors. That's kind of looking forward. This type of program can also be used in like a study group, so it can be helpful to connect with other teachers about some of these things. So if that's something that you might be interested in, in the book there's an overview of how you might do something like that, and it has like an agenda. So this is the book, and this has the chapters that we went over today, and also some other chapters with the topics that I mentioned. And so right now, we've gone over a lot of information. Maybe take a second to think about what you want to try this week and what goal do you have for this program over the next couple weeks. what strategies do you think you might want to give a try for the thoughts section as well. And you'll have access to some of those videos. And again, it's really about more the consistency and those small little changes that you can start making habits and start increasing on an everyday basis that can really add up to some positive changes in your well-being. If you have any questions about the program or any thoughts, feel free to contact me. My email address was at the beginning, but I'll also put it below if you have any, if you want to reach out. I'd be happy to hear from you. And thank you for listening today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks.